Yeah, say hello. My name's Becky. I'm a service design lead at Info Exchange. And as many of you know, I've been working alongside a wonderful team of fellows from an organisation called Code for Australia, working on an emergent product called Ask Izzy Plus, which is it's kind of like a version of Ask Izzy for people who help other people. So caseworkers, sometimes we call them service providers, and late last year, I think it might have been about, Sintu, was it in November? Late November?
Yes, it's late November, started December.
Yep, we decided to run what we've been calling a closed beta, but it's kind of like a pilot program where we got the prototype that we were working on into the hands of slightly more people than we have been before, to give them a little go and to learn some stuff. And we wanted to talk about how that experience was for us. So today I'm going to be co-presenting with Sintu, who is a designer and a Code for Australia fellow. So if you could come off mute and give us a wave, Sintu, say hello.
Hi, everyone.
And I'm also going to be throwing to Laura a fair bit. So Laura Notman is our community engagement lead, who was incredibly integral to this process. And we're going to be talking a little bit about how these skills and capabilities came together to get this thing off the ground, and some of the stuff that needed to go into making it happen. So I think most of you all know Laura.
Hi, thanks, Becky.
So before I go any further, I'd just like to acknowledge the country that I'm on. So I'm on Wurundjeri Woiwurrung country, and I just want to pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and just acknowledge the continued care and creativity that is applied to looking after country, and even just off the back of all of the different perspectives and conversation that we've been really privileged to be involved in with Invasion Day last week, and just sort of acknowledge that's where I'm coming to you from. If you want to pop what country you're on in the chat, love to know. And yeah, just acknowledge that this land was never ceded, and that we live and work and play on stolen ground. So what can you expect from today? First of all, we're going to be looking at sharing some learnings about running this particular method of testing, or what this program was about. We will cover some context in which you might or may not run a pilot or a beta. And we're also going to try and get really practical. So we want to try and lift the curtain a little bit, talk about some of the things we actually needed to build, the stuff that we needed to do in order to make a beta happen, because there's a lot of talk about what it means to run research or to launch a beta version of something, but not a lot of process. So we wanted to talk about process today, how the sausage is made in our context. So what's today not about? I regret to inform you that it's not an Ask Izzy Plus update. So we're not going to be talking much about the outcomes, the learnings, where the product's at, all of that kind of stuff. We decided that it was, we just wanted to hone in on this one little slice of what we've been up to, and make it more of a how-to. We also, it's not going to be an overview of everything that we've done. So we're zooming in quite significantly on this one interesting thing that we wanted to experiment with late last year, and just calling out too that it's definitely not the only way of doing it. This was the first time that this team came together to run a process like this, and there's probably heaps of different perspectives on it, because especially the word beta is a bit loaded, I guess, in the tech zone. Laura, Sintu, is there anything else that you wanted to add in there? Getting some head shakes, that's cool. All right, so first of all, we just wanted to talk a little bit about this idea of a machine for learning. So the part of the the reason why we wanted to get this out into the hands of the people that we're designing for is because at the moment, Ask Izzy Plus is still a bit of a prototype. And we wanted to make sure that everything that we were building was about learning as much as humanly possible about the people that we're building for and their needs, how they were going to actually use it in practice. And we kind of just reached a point where we had done enough kind of one-to-one interviews, conversations. We actually just really needed folks to get their hands on it and start, number one, using it, but also kind of breaking it. And so we really just wanted to touch base on our philosophy around how we're approaching Ask Izzy Plus, and that it's a highly iterative process, definitely not incremental. So just wanted to kind of touch on or set up some context around the difference between a machine for learning and a first release. So there was lots of things that we've decided to do throughout the last couple of months, decisions that we've made that prioritize this idea of building something iterative. So trying to design an entire experience, even if it's a bit janky, even if it's a little bit, doesn't have all of the features that we want, that actually functions straight away so that we can start learning and testing much sooner than if we had have just said, oh, we'll build one thing at a time and we'll get a final product that's super polished at the end. So just thought I'd chuck up a little diagram. Some of you may be familiar with this, the difference between iterative and incremental process. The top being incremental, where you build one thing at a time, fully perfect, fully polished, like the wheel of a car, and then two wheels, and then some wheels and a body, all the way to the end. And with this process, you're really only delivering value when you get to the end, because you can't actually get from A to B with one wheel. Whereas if you start with something a bit shitty, like a skateboard, which then graduates to a slightly better version, which is the scooter, and then to the bike, maybe a motorbike, and finally get to the car at the end, means that not only are you able to deliver value at every stage of the process, but you can test it a lot earlier. So reduces our risk because we can pivot and change and kind of adapt things as we go. So maybe Ask Izzy Plus right now is a bike. You know, it functions well. There's still a whole bunch of features that we haven't built yet, but it was established enough, this machine for learning, established enough that we could actually put it into the hands of providers and learn so much, gather so much nuance about how this was going to be used in context in people's jobs in their lives. So last thing I just want to quickly cover off was the word beta. You know, it has a couple of interpretations in the tech space. Sometimes beta is, you know, live and it's out there in the world and people are using it. In our context, we chose beta or closed beta just because we wanted to set up the expectation externally that it wasn't quite finished or that they might expect some bugs. And we used the word closed because we kept our audience really small, really targeted, really select. So it wasn't like fully available because there were some things in the way that it was built that wasn't quite ready for the real big bad world just yet. So Sintu, I'm not sure if you want to chime in here too.
Just a quick little thing as well. The Ask Izzy Plus product, I guess, was built really quickly. And for that reason, it's almost like we stole parts of the bike from other bikes or other vehicles. It's like we got a random car tire and just sort of put it on. The seat was maybe like an old piece of driftwood that was researched from 2 years ago. So we just wanted to make sure that all of these things could work in tandem and someone could actually ride the bike, so to speak.
The other thing I wanted to just add to that, Becky, is how important it was with our service providers to make sure we kept their expectations real as to what they were going to be testing. obviously we didn't want them to be going in there thinking, this is going to be awesome. It's, it's going to be perfect. And I think that was really, really important to sort of consider before we did give it to them.
That I think influenced why we called it beta. We felt like it was the language that best set realistic expectations.
Yeah.
They kind of knew they were going in and testing something a bit janky potentially.
Yeah.
But workable. Like it still let them do what they needed to do on a fundamental level. So it wasn't a wheel, it was still a bike or a skateboard, but not the polished experience potentially that they might have otherwise expected. So and just to add on to that, we chose not to build certain things into our machine for learning because for a couple of reasons. So we intentionally chose to steer away from the experience of search. We know a lot about search already. We just essentially made the basic functionality work because digging down into search can get pretty cosmic and you can really spend a lot of time there. And we'd said, you know what, we know a lot about search. It's not very risky for us. Instead, we're going to try to focus on features and parts that felt a little bit newer. So things like team functionality, things that performed really well in our initial value prop testing, like that were a little bit risky and fuzzy, but we knew people wanted it. And there were a few features that probably needed to happen further down along the journey. So things like wait times or referrals, bits and pieces like that, we intentionally deprioritized because it was going to take too long. And essentially what we did was we focused in on the things that we wanted to know most about. And as we went along, we took shortcuts so that we could get our bike up and running. So similar to Sintu saying, like, we borrowed a tire from somewhere else. Some of the shortcuts that we used in order to kind of get to this learning stage at speed was using something like a pattern library. So I think this Material UI pattern library, the screenshot that I've got here, cost us $99. And it meant that Sintu didn't have to design individual components. You could actually pull those, drag and drop them in, build something that actually worked. And we weren't wasting time kind of fiddling with the colors and the shape of the buttons and the fonts and that kind of thing. Instead, we could kind of like focus our energy on getting features up and running. We did things like a bit of dev magic where we set up some logins in the back end. So you can see down here, beta testing participants, we actually just gave them, they told us their email addresses, and we gave them passwords because we actually didn't want to test that onboarding flow, and spend time developing an onboarding flow where they sign up to Ask Izzy Plus. Instead, we actually just wanted them into those core primary features that we wanted to test. And then finally, third-party plugins. We actually use that a lot so that we could collect data and feedback. So we use Hotjar and UserSnap, which we might not use in a prod environment, but we were able to because we had this closed group of folks, and it meant that we could collect great feedback in context without actually having to build one of those ourselves. And I just saw David's hand. Chime in, please. I'd love to know what you're doing.
Sorry, Becky. No, it was a mistake in putting my hand up, but I was getting overexcited because I was going off and having a look at that. I was going off and having a look at that toolkit. So.
No worries. Yeah.
Great work. Enjoying the presentation. Thank you.
You got it. No, thank you very much. And if anyone does want to chime in, please do. Sintu, any other shortcuts that you want to tell us about?
One other tiny shortcut was we sort of got a lot of people involved that we'd already talked to before. So thanks to Laura, we'd already talked to a lot of participants from our previous research and just sort of contacted them again, asked if they would be willing to help out, which really eased the recruitment process.
Mm-hmm. That's a good call. And I know that we've probably got a couple of Ask Izzy Plus devs on the call, and I know I haven't asked you to speak, but Tim, was there any other like dev things that you wanted to? I'm not sure if actually Tim you are on the call, but quick shout out if there's any technical shortcuts that we made along the way.
Yes, I'm coming to you from Macca's. Wherever we could use existing frameworks, and same kind of thing with the design, but the same applies to pre-built code frameworks and things like that we could use. We did that. Even on the back end, Django as a choice for the back end was a big factor, because it has so many plugins and stuff that you just build with a few lines of code. If you need some new login system, just a few lines of code, that kind of thing. So we really prioritize using those technologies that allow you to just plug and play open source stuff straight in there.
And that really made sense for us in this context, because again, I just want to keep reiterating that we were building a machine for learning. And so we wanted to reduce the amount of time between where we had nothing to where we had something that we could put in front of people, even if we knew that we were going to have to come back and rethink some of our decisions, so that we could prioritize getting features out in the real world and starting to get learnings straight away. So that was an intentional decision. And so the way that we have designed this little lunch and learn is we've got a couple of prompts throughout. We've got 3 prompts to get you thinking. And I just want you to turn your minds to your own worlds right now, your own situation, the projects that you're working on, the products or services that you're working on, and just ask, and you can chuck this in the chat if you want, or even just reflect quietly, but where could you cut some corners or be frugal with your efforts in order to chase validation at speed? So is there some kind of experiment that you could run in your own world right now where you could use, just cut corners temporarily to learn something new? So if you do know something like that, you can just pop it in the chat. Laura, I've seen you've come off mute.
Yeah, I was going to say, while you're all thinking about Becky's question, I might just answer Brendan's question in the chat, which was about the service provider's response to joining and being part of it. I guess the organisations that we contacted were all fairly warm. So we had existing relationships with them, or I guess the key person at that organisation. We certainly didn't know all of the participants. That was sort of, again, a deliberate choice, because it wasn't that we needed everyone who was involved to kind of know Ask Izzy, the original Ask Izzy, and know it and use it every single day. But I guess we did want them to have that understanding and have that relationship with us, so we could be really honest with them, so they could be really honest with us in terms of feedback. So we could be really set clear expectations and just be really transparent and have that existing relationship to be able to communicate in that way. And also it was about creating a reason for why they would want to be involved. Obviously we had to think about were there going to be any incentives for the organisations, and we kind of worked out what sort of incentives there could be. But we ended up deciding there was no payment or anything like that for the organisations. They did it just in their own time. But we sort of wanted to still create value for them for being involved. So I think they really wanted to be involved. They wanted to help create something that might be useful for their organisation potentially, and also the wider community services network. So that was a big incentive for them as well. So yeah, I think they really got a lot out of it as well, and they kind of learnt some stuff. And yeah, I know we got a lot of different feedback, which we'll talk about the ways we got feedback.
And even like we'll cover this a little bit further along, but just like thinking about how we could maximize the learnings that we were getting at the lowest possible entry point for folks that were involved. So really thinking about the experience of being involved in a pilot project or a program or a beta program. But we'll get to that in a minute. So Ikai, thank you so much for your comment in the chat just about dropping the perfection, just getting something testable out there. Completely agree. Other ways that you could potentially do this are like prototypes, sketches, even something that's just done with a Sharpie. Sometimes being visual is a really great way of explaining a feature or something new. You could write a little service script. So, and I'm not talking like a coding script, I'm talking like a dialogue to test changes to part of a service. You could test that on a colleague. So with different roles potentially. I know it's daggy and it feels uncomfortable, but it's a great way of testing out whether something works or not. Or even just like third-party or lo-fi solutions. Like it's amazing how much hacks like Excel or Trello, like little tools, online tools could potentially be used in a way that's powerful to just try something out before we invest in full-scale development of a system or a tool or implementation. All right. So, Susie, please, I'd love for you to share.
Yes, I would like to learn about the whole process. So when you create this sort of front-end mockups, I guess, is that the right word? Do you have to like inform the testers that this is the area, like you said, you don't focus on the login. So this is the area of requirements that we are focusing on this iteration to test, and then the next iteration will be a different area as well. Is that how it works?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Easy. Absolutely. Yes, you are spot on. So we had a bit of a scope for what we wanted to learn, and we built in a series of info sessions and written documentation, so a little pack that we gave to people so that they knew where we were really focusing on when it came to feedback, and also just practically like how to log in and other bits and pieces in order to participate. But yes, we're very open with our participants about the fact that there were some bugs that they could expect that we found out late, without being able to fix it before our beta rolled out. And so having that dialogue was incredibly important. Thanks so much for the comment. Love it. Okie dokie. So I'm going to speed up because I'm realizing I'm a bit late. So I'm going to just skim really quickly through this next section. So it's kind of just like, why do we do this? Like, why was it appropriate for us to do that at this point? So number one, we have been doing lots of research in lots of different ways. This isn't the only way that we decided to learn, but it was the right time to do it. So we had desktop research about our users, market segmentation, other bits and pieces. We'd done some surveys, unmoderated testing. We had discovery style research where we had big kind of quite wide conversations with users, testing really low fidelity sketches and stuff like that. So it's really important to know that this wasn't like, we didn't just jump straight to the beta. We actually had a bit of a process of learning. But the reason why we needed to do it at this point was because we'd started getting a bit speculative in our open conversations. So we'd show features to people and say, if you were going to use this, how do you think you'd feel about it? Or tell me about your work right now and like, would this potentially be useful to you? We actually wanted to get away from that speculation and ask people to actually apply the tool in their work. We also need to narrow down and get some nuance. So we really wanted to flex our assumptions and some of them broke, which was awesome because we'd started to build things that that people had said that they wanted, and then they'd say, oh yeah, but we said we wanted it, but not like that. Yeah, we were really keen on notes, but not the way that you did it. And that was amazing for us to actually have that tool there to get that kind of feedback and nuance that meant we were getting closer to something that was just an amazing experience. And we also wanted to get data from a larger pool of people and observe them in context. So scaling up the amount of folks that we worked with. Things that a beta is really great for. So the pros of running one of these programs is that, yeah, it takes us away from that what if scenario. It shows us unexpected problems or bugs, which is actually ace. And it also lit the fire under us a little bit because it meant that we had a date we needed to get that beta ready for. So it did actually kind of kick us up the butt a little bit. The downside to this particular mode of testing in comparison to, say, something like a sketch or something even quicker is that it is a bit of a time investment. We needed to bring in different skills. So we had devs working on it, we had Laura, community engagement, we had to, we invested a lot of time in making sure that we had participants that knew what they were doing. It's also not a finished product, so you just can't test everything, which is potentially a con. And we also needed to be really careful about how we managed expectations. So like we talked about before, knowing that there could be things that were a bit janky and broken. So my second prompt here is just think of a question that you've been wondering about in your work. What stage are you at in your practice of continuous learning? So what do you already know? What are your hunches or assumptions? What methods have you already used to test? How far along is the idea? These are questions that just wanted to throw out there so that you can reflect on them, because the timing of when is also quite important when it comes to running a pilot or a beta. And then I'm just going to throw over to Sintu and Laura, if you guys want to add anything in at this stage.
I think you covered everything, Becky. Thanks.
Speeding along. Any questions from the audience? All right. So let's do some curtain pulling. So how did we do it? This is the really interesting stuff. So hopefully I haven't waffled on too much in there. Why and all of that stuff. So we had, we ran our program for 1 week officially. And we had 40 people from 4 different partner organisations jump on board with us. So the Benevolent Society, Zonta House over in WA, Moreland City Council, and GeForce Employment Services in Geelong. Each of these organisations are really different, which was perfect for us because we wanted to make sure that the product we were developing could exist and be valuable in different contexts. So they weren't all the same type of organisation. They were, however, orgs that we were targeting, so they all met certain requirements. But it was actually quite specific for us to say, no, we want a council. We definitely want like a smaller org. We want a bigger org with small teams inside. So that's why we chose those 4, and they were all happy to get on board. We also collected feedback in 6 different ways, which was huge. So lots of layers of feedback collection across that 1 week period. However, I'm just going to skip a slide. The process itself, that's just the 1 week. The process itself actually took a lot longer. So probably around 8 weeks in total from whoa to go, from when we decided, all right, we need to do a method like this of research, and then all of the different steps in between. But before I run into that sort of timeline, it's super important to acknowledge just the skills that are involved in setting something like this up. So obviously we need developers. Obviously we need the people with the skills to build our machine. They did such an amazing job of making sure our prototype was stable enough to be used independently. big shout out to the ISS4 team who helped us out with some last minute tweaks so that we could make sure that the environment was kind of stable so that people could actually search Ask Izzy Plus. Setting up some clever magic in the background, so bypassing that onboarding journey, so the UX journey of onboarding, and just like setting up all the logins. Absolutely amazing. And I feel like when people think about beta, you immediately go, oh, you just need devs to build it. But actually, we also needed Laura, our amazing community engagement lead, to leverage relationships, to reach out to people, to explain to them why we wanted to do the to run a little beta like this, to help set up logistics. Laura, you were doing heaps of groundwork with comms. Is there anything else that you just want to add in here that, because obviously without that, we wouldn't have people to test with. So that relationship was really critical.
Yeah, no, all of that. But yeah, just building, the importance of building those relationships just over, you know, the last years or so that you have those people that we could even go to ask in the first place. That obviously takes time as well, but that's just part of my role in general. So that was all of us coming together with all those different functions was kind of, key.
And we needed to talk to you, Laura, about like, okay, these are the type of people that we're like, these are the characteristics of the folks we want to get this in front of. And then you could go, oh yeah, actually, I know that person at Moreland City Council. I'm sure that I'd be able to like have a chat with them, or it's at an event, or
it's definitely important to have collaboration around a lot of things, not just being, okay, Laura, can you go off and do this? And obviously, devs, can you go off and do this? Because otherwise I wouldn't have had the context or be able to, communicate sort of clearly and understand who it was we really needed. So, yeah.
And so we were having little stand-ups that kind of intensified in the lead up to beta, where we started meeting almost every day to that 1 week. So just to illustrate the fact that we were kind of working in collaboration, like really, really tightly, especially the week before, when everything was kind of like, oh, have they got the emails? Made sure that this is out here and is that finished? And and then finally design and facilitation. So there's stuff involved in testing, like creating comms, like emails to explain to people how to sign up or how to use the prototype that we were going to give them. Little things like running the debrief sessions, so making sure that we were collecting feedback verbally as well as looking at all of our analytics and other bits and pieces. Sintu and I designed and delivered all of the info sessions. We also needed design in there to work on creating insight, so interpreting what we collected, both from an analytics perspective, but also from the conversations that we carefully documented. And we're hearing patterns in the things that people were saying. So not just one comment, but looking at, okay, we're starting to hear again and again, this part of the feature is broken. This is the thing that people are finding the most valuable. This is where we should focus all of our energy and efforts. So Cindy, I'm not sure if you want to jump in there too.
No, the one thing that I might add is that the synthesis and sort of understanding the findings is quite a mammoth task. Ilkay asked in the chat before that we had so many various ways of collecting feedback. So in that sense, it is quite a time-consuming and like a bit of an insane process. That being said, the stuff that we have uncovered is so valuable, and I can't think of another way that we could have gotten that sort of feedback without running some sort of beta. So like it's clear that the pros outweigh the cons in that sense.
Just a time reminder, we've only got 5 or so minutes left.
All right, let me scoot. So the steps involved, everyone is focused on this 1 week, but we started with our objectives, trying to figure out what we needed to learn in order to build the right features. Recruitment starts 6 weeks out minimum, probably 8 is better, just because it takes time to get in people's calendars. Once we had that in train, we could start to build our assets, and that's not just the prototype. So that's the tool itself, but also the info packs that we give to people, designing the sessions that we're going to use to get feedback, logistics like how do people sign up, or how do people give us their emails, or you know, just like getting stuff done. There was some pre-coms that happened in the lead up to the program. We ran the program. That was quite an intensive week. And then the last stage is to understand and process all of the data. So similar to what you were just mentioning before, Sintu. I wanted to talk a little bit about budget. So how much money it cost. All in all, relatively cheap, apart from time. So obviously, like, we invested and prioritized this work for us, and so the cost of our wages is included in that, but ultimately our total actual outlay budget was under a few $100s, just based on third-party plugins, a couple of tools that helped us get people booked into meetings like Calendly, using analytics software like Hotjar and Usersnap. But we thought, from a budget perspective, it was such a cheap way of dramatically reducing risk that it was worth it. A couple of other things that really helped set us up for a smooth run, things that worked well, was thinking about that participant experience. So kind of like what you were mentioning before, Laura, we were really careful to say, like, oh, how are they going to know how to sign up? How are they going to know, like, what to expect? So we did lots of info sheets and FAQ pages. We had an initial session with like a primary contact, like a couple weeks before, and then got all of our participants, so the 40 people, that big group, booked in and using this tool called Calendly, which meant that they had sessions they could book into, and we were going to talk them through like what they needed to do, you know, to be part of the program. We also had daily check-in emails and lots of opportunity for in-context feedback during beta, and then big debrief sessions. We also, right at the end, wrote all of the orgs a thank you note, so like a physical card, thanking them for participating, to make sure that experience was really positive for them. So we also feel like clear communication, like I know I've touched on this, but that I think really set us up for success, because people didn't have to think about trying to use the tool. They could just focus on giving us feedback. And then finally, lots of ways of collecting information. So our data sources, like I said, there were 6 ways that I can think of that we used to collect information. So one of those was Hotjar. So you can see, like, we collected information about like heat maps, where people were clicking, where they were having trouble. We used Usersnap so that people could send us feedback, which is right on the left-hand side here, that little feedback or reporting bugs. People could just log it straight away. They didn't even have to email us. It was a really, really nice user interface. We had daily surveys that people could participate in, and we got a couple of emails that way. We had one-to-one manager debriefs. We had big team debriefs where lots of people all got together in the room and kind of bounced off each other. And we also looked at analytics. And I think it's important just to acknowledge too that we were very, very transparent about there being quite an increase in the monitoring or collection of this information. And that was sort of part of what we expected, or just said, like, look, know that when you're using this prototype, when you're using Ask Izzy Plus, we're going to be watching really closely just what you click on, and collecting a lot more information than we do in the prod version of Ask Izzy, where it's far more anonymous. Things to watch out for. Recruitment takes longer than you think, so definitely 8 weeks would be comfortable, because it takes time to reach out. People work part-time, trying to get time in calendars, all of that stuff. you can't turn it around very quickly. So it's one of the first things you want to get the ball rolling on. Technical dependencies. So we had a great help from Don and Bianca, like in the couple of weeks leading up to the beta, because they had planned to do some work on ISS4, which meant that the actual functionality of the search wasn't quite stable, and we had to go, oh, actually, can you reschedule that a bit, or can we shuffle it around so that people who are going to be using this for a week can have a good experience? So really checking in on that stuff, making sure that there's some cross collaboration from the teams, and staying on top of logistics. So lots of the folks that we work with in the community sector work part-time, trying to find time in calendars. All of that stuff is like really important to like keep an eye on. So yeah, Cynthia's just said that we knew right from the start that folks are pretty time poor. So lots of different methods of communicating.
I just want to say, when we're saying recruitment, we're talking about recruiting the participants to take part in the beta, just in case people don't know what we're talking about. Because it might not be a common way to talk about, recruiting participants.
So my final prompt is just like, have you thought of a product or service that exists in your world that potentially could benefit from a beta? I know we're at time, so if you do need to run off, please do. But there might be something big, like a completely new idea, or even just a tiny component of a service or product that you're working on. Pilots don't have to be completely new, like in our case, something sort of with really different features. And then the final thing is just like an offer. So let's chat. Community impact team, we've got an open door policy. So if you ever want to know more about what we've done, or this particular methodology, or general ways of attacking some research, or big questions that you have, or just want to jam or run ideas past us, like we would love to have that conversation at Info Exchange more and more, share ways of working. So that was the end of my presentation. We can have some time for questions if people want to hang around. There's some awesome comments in the chat. And huge big thanks to the Ask Izzy Plus team. So Laura, Sintu, Tim, Mustafa, Cedric, Ben's in the mix. Some very helpful service directory folks, Bianca and Don, you saved our butts. And all of the Info Exchange folks who have helped with user testing, Robin, Amoda, our funders, partners. We couldn't have done any of this without all of those people involved. So thanks.
Thanks, Becky. Good job.
Yeah, don't forget to thank yourself, Becky.
Yeah, yes. And Becky for coordinating not only today but the whole beta program. Well done. You did an amazing job.
Oh, thanks very much. No, it was fun, and it was a really cool thing to do here at Info Exchange. So happy to hang around for questions. If you need to head off, and that's totally fine.
Thanks, Beck. Bye.
Bye.
Cool. Maybe there's no questions. Maybe we can head off.
I might just hang here until 12. The last one on the
I've got a
I
question.
just have to say, oh, sorry.
Oh, Tim, go for it.
So, is there anything you would do differently next time?
Definitely would start our recruitment a bit earlier. I would probably get the word out about beta and be like a bit more noisy about it cross collaboratively within teams earlier too, so that we didn't get that little like rush at the end where we're like, oh my gosh, is ISS4 not, this bit's broken, we actually need to fix that bit so that it works. Like just, I guess, like shouting a bit more noisily about our plans early on internally. I'm really glad the thing I would do again is all the shortcuts.
Yeah.
Because that meant that we could actually, get stuff in front of people.
The I reckon is like, which we did do, but like just extreme flexibility with working around service providers, which we always knew we needed to be, but and I think we needed to be even more so as we learnt. So just, yeah.
A lot of providers as well also wanted to keep using, like maybe I'd make it a little bit longer than a week.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
People were like, oh, I only worked 3 days, and so I only got 3 days to try it.
Yeah.
So maybe making the period, the open period of data, like formal data collection, a little bit longer.
Yeah, I'd say it's that just understanding that people work a lot of people work part-time in this sector is pretty important.
And Amoda has popped in the chat, will you be sharing the feedback? Yes, I think it might not be me. So for those of you who don't know, I'm about to have a baby and I've got 2 more weeks of work left. But there is like a pretty solid intent to do a more major update on where Ask Izzy Plus is at and some of the bigger things that we want to press into further along the track. Today was really about the process of beta. Thea?
Thank you for the great presentation, Becky. Learned so much from that. I know we also have Spud going live, and there's been a lot of chat with Robin and everyone on giving a glimpse of what we're doing to the internal folk. So the recruitment side might not be that big of a deal because we will probably be testing internally, which is great. I wanted to also, like, from hearing all of that and the 40 people testing, a lot of feedback and 6 different channels, how are we kind of maintaining that feedback? Like, I know there could be like priorities that we'll be working on these, low impact, high, whatever kind of time that needs to be put into making those things happen and stuff like that. Is there a way that you're recording all of the feedback? Because I probably want to make sure that we have certain things ready, because I feel like there'd be so much feedback coming from different people throughout, and it's a good call that 1 week might not be enough and we probably have to go a little bit longer.
Yeah, it's a really good question. Cynthia, did you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, one thing I would say actually, and one thing I would change for if we did this again, is probably staying on top of feedback a little bit better. I do think we required, I guess, 6 different forms of feedback. We wanted to make sure that we were continuously contacting people, and it was hard to sort of stay on top of that communication. In terms of synthesis, like I said before, it was kind of a mammoth task to have so much data and information coming in. The low impact, most value thing is sort of where we are right now. We're really trying to figure out what the most valuable things to work on in the future are. I'll admit there are some pieces of feedback that we haven't even really looked at yet. For example, analytics and stuff like that, because we know it's just not going to help us in the way that we need it to. So I think it's just being brutal about what's important to you right now and what can wait until later. We know there's probably going to be a time when we have to come back to some of those findings, when we know it's going to provide a little bit more value or a little bit more insight. But right now we're just focusing on this stuff.
And I think too, Thea, Ben, did you want to chime in there?
I was going to jump in with that. I think, I don't know how much usage we actually got out of something like UserSnap for this beta, but for the very low cost of integrating something like that, where you have, in place ability for somebody to screenshot something, to somebody to tag something, for somebody to make a comment on the thing they're looking at right now, is a pretty easy win, and it doesn't require building anything huge, and UserSnap's got its own little, message management sort of software as well. So stuff like that is definitely worth looking into.
The only other thing I'll add, Thea, just in terms of managing the volume, is I would say pick a point and process what you've learned and kind of build in some key insights or learnings, or even just little statements like, this is what we actually know. And you might end up with 6 of those or something like that, which can be a bit of a guidepost for you when you're making decisions in the future. So that sometimes comes in the form of a report. Like if you're a consultant, that definitely happens as a report. Internally, usually it's like a bit messier. Sometimes it's a Miro board with a couple of like key statements that we're like, these are true. This is what we've heard. But I would say, like, do go to the extra effort of kind of synthesizing it down to some key things that you feel like you really know are true. And then you can move on to the next round of testing. I think Susie had another question too.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for a very fantastic presentation. Yeah, my question is like, when you have these 40 people participating, how do you gauge, like, because like out of the 40, maybe they have different priorities on the, what the feature is important to them, and not to mention you got the wider sort of users group as well. Like, Tia mentioned, prioritize the low impact. How do you do? I mean, you just ignore it, but low impact to this group may be high impact to the other group, Yeah, thank you.
So what I'm hearing from your question is that, like, how do you manage the different themes that are coming out in the feedback? Is that right?
Yeah, sort of like each iteration, you got different feedback. And then let's say I'm one of the testers. I see AI is very important because I need to do reporting. But for us, we don't care about AI. It's something later, right? Reporting is not very important. We want the feature. And then the next time I, did the second iteration for the testing, I don't see my requirements, top priority being, incorporated, and I got frustrated, just an example.
I would say, yeah, that really helps. I would say that what we're looking for are like larger trends, definitely. Like, so looking at how often particular themes will come up again and again, so that we know that that's a higher priority than some of the requests that may come through from one or two or like a smaller group of users potentially, because we understand that it meets like a very specific need. Obviously, we've all got to manage our time, so focusing on the thing that's going to give most users the biggest amount of value is where we want to be sort of sitting. So it's really looking at those overarching trends.
So do you do like a survey with the bigger user group then, rather than this focus group?
No. So, yep. So first of all, we'd probably look at some of the bigger themes that are coming out of the initial group of 40. So things that are quite global, that are existing across most of the users. And then if you wanted to get a bit more of a quantitative vibe, that's probably our next stage, where we start to actually like put this in the hands of not just 40 people, but testing it out with 1,000 users, or funneling off like a larger volume so that we can start to see information that's coming back. The downside to that, so you don't get to understand why those things are working or why people are using those features as much as when you have access to them. You can ask them questions, you can follow things up, you can target particular users or groups of users in some of those debrief sessions and be like, but tell us more about how that actually worked in practice for you. So there's pros and cons for both. And Sintu?
Sorry, one of the things I also wanted to mention that was helpful for us was we had a little bit of a circle around findings that we were really focused on. So we were really focused on stuff that was around teams and features that we'd already built and validating whether they were useful or not. So that sort of stuff kind of took priority for us. And we got a lot of little random findings as well. I remember someone was like, I would love a dark mode. Which would be really, really cool to focus on, but definitely something down the line because it's just not relevant with the stuff that we were focused on finding out about now.
And I was going to say, I think in terms of maybe managing the expectations of the participants, like say we do another something like this, and then they use it and then they go, oh, hey, I gave all this feedback on this and you've not listened to it. So I think we definitely will share our findings with all of the participants so that they can understand what came up, what is a bigger priority for us than some of the other very useful things that they told us as well. So we will definitely make sure to share all that with them.
Thank you. This very thorough explanation.
There's other tools like Acute, if you've heard that before. It's a customer feedback tool, and there might be hundreds of them out there anyway, for like live products where the community is asking for certain features, people upvote features, so it kind of goes up the top, and then the product teams know what their preferences are for which group and what people might need. And I think I just thought of that right now, but maybe something that we can use when we go live, or even later, I don't know, but it might need to be available for the community to actually upvote and have feedback.
Love that suggestion, Thea. Oh my goodness, we've gone 15 minutes over and we've still got people here. Is there any other, like, I think we should call it at 1. But is there any other final, if there is, we probably don't have time to get into it now, but I just encourage you very much to reach out to the community impact team, the design team, Sinju, Laura, Ben, Brendan, Mitchell, Sam, some of our dev team. Like, if you just want to know a little bit more, we're all about the chat. So make sure that you reach out and we can do a little jam. We might not always be able to get fully involved in your projects, but we're here to bounce ideas around for sure, no matter what. So, alrighty, might leave it there. No worries, Mary. Thank you. Thank you for staying.
Hey.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Cheerio.